Everybody, welcome to another episode of Unparalleled Sports Talk with your host Kwame Fisher-Jones. As always, I'm him. And I'm joined once again by the new wardrobe wearing Everett Terry Jr., aka Sports Talk Terry on all social media platforms. You're better than me, bro. That's that single life that I talk.
Listen,
You bat
it's
an eye with me.
insane that we wear the same thing on the same show at the same time. And we've done that more than once. But that's
Yeah,
because we share the same birthday. We're
yeah.
twins.
And you're,
We
you're
are
the
legitimately twins.
single version of, well, I wouldn't even say you're the single version of me because you're a little wilder than I was. But speaking of
Ah,
wild,
I'm definitely the light skinned version of you.
speaking of wild, the reports are that Gary Trent Jr. left money on the table, which is always wild to me, and I never believe it. But that he took less money to sign with the Milwaukee Bucks. And the reason why I transitioned into wild is I think this is a huge signing for the Bucks. I think this is a needle moving signing. I'm a big Gary Trent Jr. fan, and he left the other offers on the table to go play with Damian Lillard and pursue a championship. So, with that being said, I look at it as I think this puts the Bucks. I question if they were going to be a top 3 seed again, and I'll get into that later. But I think this elevates them, and this makes them a formidable championship contender. What say you?
Well, the Bucks were a formidable contender without Gary Trent. I mean, the only thing that stopped the Bucks, well, two things.
Here we
One,
go. Here
Giannis
we go. Here we
one,
go.
Giannis being injured, and the
Uh,
second, Doc Rivers.
I knew
Like
it was coming.
you already know. Listen, Doc Rivers took over a team that had a top three record in the association. And you know what they
Facts.
did when he came in? They went 17 and 19 down the stretch and lost in
Facts.
the first round to the Indiana Pacers, who owned them the back half of the season. Say
How did
whatever
Giannis
you
doing that
want.
series? How did Giannis doing the Pacers series? Just curious.
Doesn't matter. They went
Oh,
out there and got
okay.
molly.
Okay.
They
All
went out
right.
there. They went out there and got mollywopped by the Knicks. It
Okay.
doesn't matter. The Bucks with Lillard are a better team than the Pacers, and we saw it. As much as I like the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton, they're not a better team with the Bucks, whether Giannis plays or he doesn't. But that's the effect of having a guy like Doc Rivers who can't win leading your team. I keep saying it. People don't believe me, and then he keeps proving me right year after year after year. He doesn't know how to win in the playoffs. That is why they don't win. Don't win. The only title he ever won featured three Hall of Famers on the roster and one that he didn't know was going to be a future Hall of Famer. The only reason he can't win unless he's got an all-star team full of players. And I say it all the time. Nobody has coached more perennial top tier all-star caliber rosters than Doc Rivers, and no one has lost more considering who he's coached in his career. You say whatever you want. Facts are facts. The man has coached everybody and only has one title to show for it. And if you give him your team, be prepared to make a playoff run, but not to see a title.
Zach, oh, you done now? You done now?
I'm done. I had to get my Doc Rivers rant off my chest because people swear by this guy. He's such a great coach. He's a player's coach, blah, 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 blah. I don't care about any of that. He don't know how to win when it matters, whether it's not making the right moves with the roster, whether it's not calling the right timeouts, whether it's saying scheduled losses. What the hell is a scheduled loss on an 82-game season? Like, these are the things that the guy that's supposed to be the forefront of your organization says to people, and y'all can't understand why you lose. Well, had you taken one of those scheduled losses and turned them into a win, maybe you're not playing a team like the Pacers in the first round. Maybe you're getting a more favorable matchup, and maybe you're not sitting there at home in the first round because you get Giannis back for round two, and now all of a sudden the Bucks are facing the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I'm gonna mind my business because I don't know basketball. Okay, fine. Y'all keep going for Doc Rivers and giving him coach awards and thinking that he's so great because he and Pop got a title together. Stop it. Stop it. Do you ask Pop? Pop got 5 rings. Pop could coach Pop Warner if he wanted to, and people would still take Pop over you, sir. Nobody's taking Doc Rivers as a coach over Pop in anything.
Sure you done?
I'm done.
He would interrupt you. Last 10 years, Doc's teams have won 60% of their games, 60% or more of their games. Look, you say what you say, whatever you want to say about the playoffs. The truth speaks for itself in the playoffs. I cannot dispute that. But the man is a hell of a basketball coach. Now, I did not believe in the Bucks this year because it pains me to say this, but I believe Giannis is on the tail end of his career. The last few years, he's had season-ending injuries. And not talent-wise, but I think his body is beginning to break down. And I have serious doubts that he could go the full length of the year and the full stretch of a playoff run. Adding Gary Trent Jr. adds not only another shooter, but it adds a different lineup. So, for instance, what I mean by that is when Giannis isn't in the game, you still have a lethal dead-eye shooter to go along with Damian Lillard, to go along with Brook Lopez. And if he's playing well, to go along with a Bobby Portis. That's a good enough basketball team to compete in the first round without Giannis. You add Giannis, now you're talking about a championship team. But
don't forget Chris Middleton.
I forgot about Chris Middleton because he's also been hurt. He's also been hurt. That's why I had questions. But Gary allows them to get away from you. Don't even. Chris Middleton's a fantastic player. I'm not saying you don't need him, but he could be a commodity and rather than a necessity with Gary Trent Jr. in his quad. Well, a lot of people don't know about Gary Trent Jr. You and I do because we're losers and we watch Portland. We used to watch Portland Trailblazer games and Toronto Raptor games. You know what I mean? We watch those guys. So we know that Boucher in Toronto is a good player. We know that Scotty Barnes, like, whoa, I don't know if we're backing the truck up for him. And we also know that Gary Trent Jr. around quality veterans is going to be a good player. And
he's a great bench
adding
piece.
him, but you killed Doc, and I'm this is not the debate for Doc. It's a story for another day. You gave all those numbers, and I'm gonna sit on my numbers. 10 years, not including last year, last 10 years, not including last year, 60% more he won his games. He's going to have a healthy Giannis to start the year. He's going to have a training camp with Damian Lillard, and they're going to have something that we haven't seen on a championship level team in a long time. Probably since maybe when the Lakers were going for their four-peat. We're going to see a chip on their shoulder. We're going to see an aggression and anger, a fire in their belly that we didn't see last year. I like the Bucks now. I like them a lot. I didn't like the Celtics, full disclosure. Me, along with a lot of people, thought the Celtics would implode. They didn't. They managed to survive a Porzingis injury, and their hard work prepared them, gave them the opportunity, and they were prepared to have an easier road to the finals. Much like Denver fell the next year, I think the Boston Celtics will fall again.
Before you go too far, and we have to do it because we haven't done it, Joe Mazzulla is a much better coach than we gave him credit for because stop it. Hold on.
We hate Doc, but we love Joe. We hate Doc, but we love Joe now.
You crushed Joe Mazzulla before we gave him a chance to see what he could be. And what I'm telling you is this is what you know. And I've listened to his post conferences. First of all, he's slightly on the spectrum, which means his mind already works different than everybody else around him. That's not a bad thing because the way he breaks down plays, looks at numbers, sees formations is far different than anybody else that we've seen coach in the association. He's a smart guy and he knows ball. He made the right plays when he needed to. And he's the first person that took that roster of the Celtics, despite Porzingis being injured. He didn't make excuses. And he got them to where they should have been years ago with this team, to where Brad Stevens couldn't get him, to where Emi Udoka couldn't get him. He got him over the hump and got him to the title. Say whatever you want. He got him there. Take that from them.
This, ladies and gentlemen,
Dallas beating them in the finals.
Next, he's going to tell me that Jake won the Kendrick Lamar beef. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a specific example of light-skinned brothers sticking together. This is what this is. This is an example of light-skinned dudes sticking together. You know, Joe Mazzulla could be, he is yellow. Joe Mazzulla could be the next coming of my favorite coach of all time. You know what I mean? Your favorite coach of all time. But you know why I'm always going to have an issue with him? You know I'm always going to have an issue? You know, it's you're sitting at the bar. I'm going to use this analogy. You're sitting at the bar, and this girl comes in, and she screams. She calls you out of your name. She takes your money. She goes into your pockets, takes your money out, right? Tells everybody in the bar that you're an a-hole. You got a little this, and, you know, you've done all these awful things, right? And then the next day, she says, look, I'm sorry. I was upset. You want to go out on a date? You're going to say no. Because it doesn't matter how attractive she is. It doesn't matter what was going on. The way she came to you, the way she presented herself to you in the initial introduction is all you're going to see. Joe Mazzulla was brought to the Boston Celtics after they fired a top head coach who was overqualified for the position, who had exceeded expectations for something non-basketball related. So it
What's
doesn't
that have
to
to do
me
with Joe?
matter. It doesn't matter to me what Joe does. He did not earn that position. He did not achieve that position. He was given that position. He was given that position because they did not want to keep the person who should have had that position. So the way he was brought to me, the way he was presented to me, the way he was handed to me is always going to be tainted. Therefore, anything he accomplished, I'm never going to see for the likes. And this was a team that had been in the NBA Finals prior to. Floor is yours.
All right, so I'm gonna say this, and I'm glad you brought that up. You talk about guys getting positions in organizations that they didn't deserve. Steve Nash.
Didn't earn.
Whoa. I'm about to go down the list. Steve Nash, Adrian Griffin. I can give you like 2 or 3 more.
Adrian Griffin earned his position. He had been an assistant coach for years in Toronto too. He had
Joe
earned his
Mazzulla was
position.
an assistant coach. It doesn't matter.
Joe Mazzulla was an assistant coach for an hour.
Stop it. The
He
point
was an
I'm
assistant
making
coach
is
for an hour. Adrian Griffin's got an NBA championship on his resume.
Guys get gift wrapped star-studded rosters all the time. We've seen it over the last 5 years. Guys come in and get to coach these roster-filled, these star-studded rosters and don't win, and then everybody says, well, they shouldn't have gave him that job. And I gave you the most prominent one in my mind, which is Steve Nash, but there's 2 or 3 more that I know I'm skipping over, and that'll come to me late. JJ Redick. There we go. Here's another one. JJ Redick. Ain't coached you and me, but he out here coaching an NBA team because he talks great on a podcast. Again, that's no different than me and you getting an NBA head coaching job. We can know ball all day long, but we don't deserve the job. But my counter argument to that is I'm not going to penalize the guy who comes in and gets the team and gets the job done with the roster because the guy before him, which had nothing to do with him, messed it up. That's unfair to me. That's like saying, hey, I'm going to penalize this chick because of what the last chick did to me. It's unfair to her because you never gave her a chance to prove herself. Because if she comes in and wows you and does everything right, who am I to sit there and penalize you if you did your job? He did his job. He took that team to a level they hadn't had a banner raised in, 15, 20 years. He helped them do that. So I'm not going to penalize him for doing what nobody else could do. So at that point, what are we talking about? You don't like him because he came behind Emi Udoka, who, by the way, landed on his feet in Houston and has a young team that will make the playoffs next year. But what I'm saying to you is I'm not going to penalize him for getting a job because somebody else messed up. It'd be something if he did it or was the whistleblower or was snaking him behind his back or whatever. He didn't do any of that. He came in, was given an opportunity, took advantage of it, and he showed you just because I got the job doesn't mean I didn't earn it once I got here. Because he got command of respect from those players. You won't hear a single player say bad about him, and he knows ball. Listen to his press conferences. He knows basketball, and the way his brain works and how he talks, dude is sharper than a tack. He's sharper than a 70s pimple on Christmas, Easter, Sunday morning, whatever day you want to pick. It doesn't matter. He knows his stuff. I'm not going to strip him of that. Back to Doc Rivers, though. Doc Rivers is somebody who's been given tons of opportunities and done absolutely nothing with them.
Oh, stop it. Doc has earned it. Doc has earned it. No, I can't let you do that. I can't let you do that. I can't let you do that.
More people with talent.
No, go ahead. I can't let you do that.
More talent than anybody else and anybody. I can give you a who's who of guys he's coached in his career. Who's who? He's coached more talent than anybody else in the history of basketball.
Right. Just hold on before you go, because you say that point a lot. And I never really do this, but I'm going to do it, and then we're going to move on. But you say he's coached who's who? How many of the guys he's coached, right? How many have been to the NBA Finals without him?
How many have been to the NBA Finals without him?
Without him.
Now you're gonna ask me a question that's gonna make me have to sit down and think. I mean, I can find a number, but
I don't have to think. I can answer the question because the reason why I said it is when I evaluate Doc Rivers, this is what I evaluate: a coach that has made players better and taken them to levels they haven't been to. Because you get to the NBA, and you'll agree with me here. When you get to the NBA, everybody can ball in the NBA. Everybody's got levels.
This is true.
And everybody's in your work ethic and your confidence will take you to different levels. But the coaching will allow you to go to a place you can't get to on your own. Chris Paul had never been out of the second round, right? Before Doc Rivers. He gets to Doc Rivers. I want to say he's never been out of the first round, but he gets Doc Rivers. And, respect to Byron Scott, who got that team to the playoffs as well, but, they lost San Antonio. He gets Doc Rivers. They make it to the second round. Now, all of a sudden, they're underachieving. What did Chris Paul do after he left Doc Rivers? He went to the NBA Finals right away with Phoenix.
Which you just said, that's one player.
That's it. But that's it. That's it, Chris Paul. Kevin Garnett had never made it he made it to the Western
Conference Finals. At the end of his career.
Kevin, no, I'm talking about before he got to Boston. No, I'm talking about before he got to Boston. I'm talking about Kevin Garnett before he got to Boston. He made it to the Western Conference Finals once. Chris Paul had a beautiful career, was supposed to go to Los Angeles, all those things before he got to Doc, gets to the second round, and after that, nothing.
So I'm gonna go down the list top of my head, guys, that I know that have been to the NBA Finals without Doc Rivers in their career. Kevin Durant, James Harden.
Doc didn't coach them. I'm talking about guys specifically that Doc Rivers coached. You're saying he underachieved because he had all this talent. And all I'm saying is you're saying he underachieved because he had all this talent. And what I'm saying is
James Harden is one. Ray Allen is two.
James Harden
to the NBA Finals without Doc Rivers. That's what you asked.
Well, yeah, yes, and you're right. You're right. And that's why I pull back. You're right. I'll give you James Harden. I don't know. My only reason for pause. No, my only reason for pause for James Harden is, and you're right. I'll say it again. You're right. I just wonder about the context of how severed that relationship was with Daryl Morey, and how much of that played a role in James Harden not being a little better in that game 6 against Boston. Because they had game 6 there, but I preface it and I end my statement with, you're right. James Harden is another. James Harden is probably the only one that I can think of that you would say, you know what, Doc should have gotten more out of it. Because I feel like Doc wasn't the coach for Ben Simmons. And this is a whole nother conversation.
That is a whole nother conversation.
I felt like the coach for Ben Simmons was in Los Angeles, and they lost Ben Simmons the moment they decided to go with Doc and Joel Embiid over Ben Simmons and Ty Lue. Had you done that, I think the Sixers are in a different position. But going back to Doc Rivers,
you think Ty Lue would have a better coach for Ben Simmons?
I think Ty Lue would have gotten much more out of Ben Simmons than anybody over the age of 50 would have. Because
I was going to say Pop would have got the most out of him for sure.
I don't think Pop's going to get the most out of Ben Simmons either.
I think so, because listen, Pop got the most out of Kawhi. We've seen what Kawhi's done since he left. Absolutely nothing outside of Toronto. Outside of the one Toronto season, which was a mid-season move.
Bro. Like, Kawhi, it's Tim Duncan.
I'm not arguing that. But what I'm saying to you is Pop is a championship coach, and he gets a lot out of his players. He gets the maximum talent out of them. He does. You can't name me a player who played with Pop and got better without being with Pop after they left. You can't name me one. Everybody who played with Pop played at their best with Pop. Everybody. He gets the most out of his guys. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Ben Simmons being with Pop would have given Ben Simmons something he's never had in his entire life and still doesn't to this day. And the reason why he's sitting out there in free agency hoping somebody wants him. Accountability. The same thing that every woman, not every, but most women run from in an argument. Accountability. Accountability matters. You have to be accountable. And if you don't know how to be accountable, you're never going to get better in life. That's facts. That's not fiction. You give Ben Simmons accountability. You give Ben Simmons accountability, he could have been Magic Johnson 2.0. But because he didn't have any, he could do what he wanted, he ended up being washed up and out the league before 30. That's his fault.
Well, he's still in Brooklyn. He's still got a year left. But I get to just
being a minute on transition, that floor.
Moving from one player who is on his way out of the league to another player who appears to be holding on by a thread. Russell Westbrook. One of my favorite players of all time, a guy that I was in on, then out on, and in on again.
Brody.
Transitions and joins the Denver Nuggets. Denver, by signing this, Denver has admitted that, look, we miss Bruce Brown a little more than we anticipated.
Right.
They just lost Contavious Caldwell-Pope, who is going to be a huge loss. Quiet as is kept. Every decade, every generation, every championship team has a guy that when they lose this guy, that's not a star, obviously. But when they lose this guy, the wheels start falling off. And, for
Shane
the Lakers,
Battier comes to my mind.
who?
Shane Battier.
Shane
One of
Battier
those
comes to
guys
your
who
mind. I was thinking about Robert
always,
Ory. I was
Robert
thinking
Ory's
about
another
Robert
one.
Ory, and the Lakers, when they lost Austin, not Austin, what's that guy? Caruso, Alex Caruso. I call it about
Alex
to say
Caruso.
Austin. When they
Yeah,
lost Alex Caruso and Contavious Caldwell Pope, they have not been the same team. And
I agree with that.
the Denver Nuggets losing Bruce Brown 1 year and now losing KCP, which is a guy I wanted the Sixers to trade for when he was in Washington. Before,
He
I'll never
fits
understand.
so many pieces as a 3-and-D guy who knows how to fit in, be his role, and doesn't need the ball. He's perfect for a team that needs a shooter that can defend off the bench. It's like
He's in
you say,
Orlando.
"Oh, we want this guy," but then you don't get him. And you know who he goes to? A team where he fits perfectly because he brings a championship pedigree to a young roster that needs a defensive guy that's a shooter.
When they knew they weren't going to get Clay, they transitioned. They wanted to get both of them, and when they
Right.
didn't even waste time, they said, "Well, we'll just throw all our eggs in there." And we're talking they being Orlando Magic. But going specifically back to Russell Westbrook, what do you think at this stage of his career does he bring to Denver Nuggets?
Uh Stats wise, 10 to 12 points a game.
That's impact. Let's go impact.
Well, yeah. So I'll start with the stats to define the impact. 22 to 26 minutes off the bench. He's going to give you 12 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 to 3 turnovers. But he's going to give you high energy, high effort. He's going to give you championship pedigree. He's going to give you a guy that comes in and works hard every day. Will play if he can play.
Championship pedigree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Russ,
What
and
championship?
when I say championship pedigree, what I mean is Russ hasn't won, true. But what I'm saying is he has the moxie of a champion.
Oh.
Russ learned in OKC that I can't be the guy jacking if I'm not the guy that's jacked. And so if you've noticed his game, he now is willing to do the grunt work. And when I say championship pedigree isn't about just winning. It's about guys willing to do, and I had this argument the other day, the grunt work, go for the loose ball, yell, dive
He's
out of
always done
bounds.
that, E. He's always done that, E.
But he's never done it from a bench role and willing to be the guy to do whatever the team needed him to do to
Okay.
help the team win. He did it as the star, as the alpha, as the lead, but never as the second guy off the bench because he's not going to get minutes over Murray. They might spot start him with Murray periodically. They might play him on days where Murray's out for rest, but he's not going to supplant Jamal Murray for that lead point guard spot. So you look at him and what does he do? Well, again, high energy, going to attack the rim, going to draw defenders in, can still get to the rack when he wants to. Still has enough burst to do that, and he's going to hold guys accountable. That's the big thing with Russ. He's big on accountability, and I think with a team like Denver, who does have that championship moxie, they've already won and they want to get back. I think that was that little piece that they were missing last year. That, and they just ran up against a very, very hungry team. But I think that now that's going to help get them over the edge this year. I really, really do. I really do. I think that he gets them back to the Western Conference Finals, and I think they play Minnesota. I love Minnesota.
There's a young cat on Denver, Caucasian. He comes off the bench. I forget his name. He's an athletic guy, energy guy for them.
Oh,
Exactly. I forget his name, but when you think of,
yeah.
you can take a look and see if you can find it. I can't find it right now. The reason why I position shows, the reason why I position topics the way I do is not just because, it's the first thing that pops in my mind. It's because I kind of have an idea of your line of thinking. And I also have an idea of where the conversation is going to go, and then I'll reel it back there. We talked
You're not
about
talking
Doc
about
Rivers.
You're not talking about Christian Braun, right?
Braun, yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay,
Christian
all right,
Braun.
yeah. I thought that's who you were, but I wasn't sure. Christian Braun,
Yeah,
yeah.
Christian Braun, thank you. Hold on to that name. So I knew you were not new, but I had a feeling you would go with Doc Rivers and getting the most out of their players. So Michael Malone, I don't think is going to get the most out of Russell Westbrook. I think Michael Malone is not going to play Westbrook the way Ty Lue played Russell Westbrook. Because Michael Malone is not the coach that Ty Lue is. And I think Michael Malone is closer to the coach that Doc Rivers is. Great regular season coach. If the matchups fall their way, and he doesn't have to adjust. He doesn't have to change. He doesn't have to. He can stick to the game plan that he put together in the first quarter of game one. He'll be fine. But Denver was, I don't say a bad team, but Denver has been the same team for 4 or 5 years now. The same
Agreed.
coaching staff, same coaching staff. I love Calvin Booth as a general manager. I think he's got good plans. Unfortunately, financially, couldn't keep the team together. Not because they didn't refuse, they couldn't pay the guys. It just didn't make sense to pay them the money that they were going to get. And you want guys to be rewarded for their efforts. But I bring that to reason because for me, I look at a guy who is now has to coach up guys. Jamal Murray was a mess last year. Where was the coaching? Guys were admittedly tired, mentally worn out. Where was the coaching? They weren't the first team to win an NBA title. It's harder to go back to back because you're mentally checked out. So you need somebody to mentally bring you back. Mike Malone couldn't do that. They were up big in game 7 against Minnesota. They couldn't shut the door. They couldn't call the right timeouts to stifle a run. They couldn't make the right switches. They couldn't figure out a way to not just stop Anthony Edwards, but they couldn't figure out a way to slow down Karl Anthony Towns. And I'll say this till I am purple. Forget blue, till I am purple. If the Lakers had gotten out of their we don't want to support whatever feelings and had re-signed Dwight Howard, and you know I am not an if guy. Had they done that, Denver would have lost in the first round. The way to beat Denver is very simple. You have a center and a power forward. That eliminates the Aaron Gordon toss-up alley-oop play that Joker likes to do, and that forces Joker to guard size and athleticism on the other end. Michael Malone never adjusts. Now, what does that have to do with Russell Westbrook? Now you're dropping a guy. I love Russell Westbrook. He's energy. He's all the things you mentioned, but he's also a guy who needs a coach. He did all that crazy stuff in Oklahoma City because he didn't have what? A coach.
A coach.
He did all that crazy stuff in Washington because he didn't have what? A coach.
Went back to Scott Brooks.
All of a sudden in Perville, Russ is balling out of his world. Russ is an attribute, an asset to the community. He's got commercials and endorsements. What just happened? Same dude that Philly passed him was coaching.
Which I screamed from the mountaintops when they were looking for a coach. Why not hire Ty Lue?
Michael Malone is not the coach for Russell Westbrook. This has my kids like to say this all the time, make fun of me because I say it all the time. This has got disaster written all over it. This is disaster, abort plan now. Because Joker wanted Russell Westbrook. Calvin Booth didn't want Russell Westbrook. Michael Malone didn't want Russell Westbrook. Joker wanted Russell Westbrook. And I don't use the phrase inmates asylum, but I will say this. When you let the kids pick the food at the grocery store, you get a crappy grocery list. You get a crappy grocery run. That's what happens when you let players pick the players. They didn't need Russell Westbrook. They needed a guy Michael Malone to get along with. Floor is yours.
I don't know about the kids' grocery list thing because I've typically found that if you buy food kids ain't gonna eat, you end up wasting money. So it's easier to just let them get what they want.
Yeah, all right.
To that end. And you'll find it gets more common as your kids get older. When they're babies, it's easier. Yeah, but when they get older, the argument about Mike Malone not being able to coach Russell Westbrook, I don't know that that's necessarily not true. I don't see any reason why Russell Westbrook wouldn't respect Mike Malone as a coach. He's never done anything to him or spoke ill of him as a person or a player. And Mike Malone, even from the players that have played or played there, have never said, oh, well, Mike Malone was a bad guy. Or like, he ain't George Karl now. Now, George Karl's a bad guy. He was a guy where guys were like, nah, I don't like that dude. You're not going to get that from and Russell Westbrook. The one thing about Russell Westbrook, say whatever you want. He's a consummate professional. Whether he likes the situation, doesn't like the situation, he's a consummate professional. He will never hurt his brand. And he's going to do his job and come to work every day. I think that he's an asset to Denver. I'm okay with Joker making the call. Joker doesn't ask for much from what you see and hear, outside of having his brothers goon up at the games and kind of threaten people that look at him wrong.
Exactly.
But beyond that, what else does he really do? He's a guy that stays low key. He's not on social media making a fool of himself or embarrassing that organization. He comes to work every day. He's available more than any other big man in basketball, including Joel Embiid. Yeah, I said it. So for what it's worth, if the man says, hey, get me Russell Westbrook, who's at the back end of his career on a 2-year deal because I think he helps us win. We need a backup point guard anyway.
Vet minimum.
I'm not mad at it. Vet minimum's even better. Okay,
and
2-year deal, vet minimum, bring them in. What are they going to say? No? Why would you want to piss off your best player who's brought a championship to an organization that didn't have one? That wasn't even a championship caliber team through most of Melo's years, despite how great he was, because George Karl was a terrible coach.
And we found that out.
Dikembe, who couldn't win most of the time with Dikembe Mutombo in his prime. You see what I'm saying? What I'm saying to you is they became relevant because of Joker. And if Joker says, get me Russ, get him Russ. The end.
Well, and solid points. What I will say to that, my rebuke to that is this. Disaster doesn't happen in a big, loud boom. It starts with little things. You mentioned a couple things there. Joker's brothers smacking people around in the stands. So if Joker's name was Malik and those were brothers from North Philly,
we're not having that conversation.
Oh wow. You just said it. Put on a t-shirt. Oh wow. That right there is damn it, you're right. It's another way to say, damn it, you're right. I didn't think of it that way. Oh well, it's the way. Followed by
candy and nuts.
Fact. If you say, then for the simple fact that so I don't even need to continue.
First of all, Malik's brothers wouldn't be allowed in the arena, but that's a whole other conversation.
So the point is, though, we got about 7 minutes, and I want to get your worst trade in the last 15 years. For me, it's a bad fit. Malone's personality is not going to drive with Russ, and it's not because they're two bad people. It's just sometimes personalities don't work. And this right here is not going to happen. And the fact that it was Joker that wanted him set off alarms in my head, because when players start asking for players, they're trying to fill something they don't think they have on a roster. So what you're basically telling me in no certain order is you think he's better than whoever you had in that role. And that speaks to your coach.
I can't even remember who their backup point guard was last year.
It was Reggie Jackson. Now, who's now going to be in Philly.
Right.
Quickly. Worst trade in the last 15 years.
All right. So ironically, watch this. The worst trade in the last 15 years goes to none other than Russell Westbrook to the Los Angeles Lakers. Because who did they give up in that trade?
Everybody.
Kyle Kuzma.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Kuzma. He went in that deal.
Yeah.
Yes. No, the Alex Caruso went to the Vucevic deal.
Yeah, he went. Well, yeah, Alex Caruso, because they didn't want to sign him, so he wound up signing with Chicago outright. But had they signed him, he would have gone. For me, the worst trade is it's the reason why I picked this is because I'm working on a story of worst trades in the last 15 years.
But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was in that deal too.
Yeah, Caldwell-Pope was in. You had it right. It was
Kentavious and Kuzma. Yeah. And I remember when they lost, I said these are two glue guys. And to his credit, Kyle Kuzma's been practically a 20-9 guy in Washington and has been a solid player. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, we just screamed his praises 2 minutes ago. Meanwhile, Brody didn't last the season and a half there and didn't make the Lakers any better. And they had just won the bubble title.
And who wanted Brody? I forgot. Player.
LeBron.
You're
not gonna tell King James he can't have what he wants.
The hell I can't. There's room for everybody.
Show me what team you go to and tell LeBron no, and it's worked out for you.
Cleveland.
And how did it work out for Cleveland?
They won a championship.
No, they didn't. He left, and then they came back and gave him what he wanted, and they won a championship. He said, "Get me help." They didn't. He left, and then when they came back the second time, he said, "Get me help." They said, "Okay."
Yeah.
Come on now.
So for me, the worst trade is it's two of them. The Kevin Durant trade wasn't really a trade because he was signing with somebody else. I can't really use that as a trade. So I'm going to go with the Ben Simmons, James Harden trade. Now you say, why is that a bad trade? Like
they both lost.
Yeah, exactly. In the case of the Nets, they traded Harden basically because he didn't want to play there anymore because they weren't going to pay him allegedly, but also because he knew Steve Nash wasn't a good coach, and he wanted to get out. He wanted to get out of Brooklyn. It was a sinking ship. The players know it before we know it. He knew that Kyrie wanted out. Everything was going to hell in a high water. With Philly, the reason why it's a bad trade is because you draft a guy named Tyrese Maxey, who plays as a rookie in the playoffs, gives you 50 points as a rookie. You may think you got something special there, but you know he's not a true point guard, and he's an undersized two guard. You're trading a guy who is, at that point in his fourth or fifth year, who was ascending until he had problems with the coach, had problems with his best player. You want to sign someone that's going to fill that type of skill set. Defensive first, transition, and it's probably a better scorer. But you want a guy that's going to be a defensive first transition guard who can run with Maxey because you think you got something special. Nah, give me the oldest point guard you can find who likes to.
You know what I'm going to say, right?
Well, they could have DeJounte Murray.
You know who I'm going to say.
You're going to go with Halliburton.
Yes, I am, because that deal was on the table. Tyrese
Halliburton isn't a debate about
and Buddy Hield was on the deal 2 years before that. You get him. You don't worry about getting James Harden at that point. You have Tyrese to run with Max.
Boy. Buddy Hield?
Buddy Hield 2 years ago was actually decent. He just wasn't.
I'm not going to dispute people. I'm not here to dispute people. I want to agree with points. And we both agree on the same point that with that trade, it was you got the wrong person, you got the wrong skill set, and you missed out on a slew of players who were younger and better fits for you.
But I will say this. The problem was before the Sixers whiffed on the chance to go get Halliburton, the value on Ben Simmons did this. It was already headed down after that playoff game. People already had concerns that he might have the same thing that Markelle Fultz had, which was the yips, okay? And if you want me to be honest,
lack of talent,
the worst trade, I'm going to give you the worst trade. The worst trade is the 76ers trading from 3-1 and taking Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum.
That's actually a better trade. You're right. That's actually a better trade.
Because Markelle Fultz has been, at best, a 10-point per game bench guy who never amounted to the first overall pick that he was. And Jason Tatum's only went on to be an all-NBA player, a world champion, and a face of a franchise.
And Olympian, yeah. And he did, you know what? He's rich. I think I need to act like Farrakhan talking to Ben Wallace or talking to Mike Wallace and just be quiet. You're right. That is the worst trade in the last 50 years. There is none worse. There is no worse or one there.
One franchise went one way, and the other franchise went the other way.
And it cost everybody their job except for the scout that said, "Say, blood, I told you, cuz that's who we should have went with." Yeah. That's it for this episode of Unparalleled Sports Talk. If you enjoyed the podcast, like the podcast, share, subscribe to whatever your podcast platform allows you to do. For the great Sports Talk Terry, who nailed it this segment, and I'm Kwame Fisher-Jones. As always, we appreciate your time and your ear. Until next time.